When I was a younger, more naive man, I mean, I didn't have faith in, the American presidents that I presented mathematically perfected economy to. I could have presented Nixon because this idea, stems from, actually a very young age. I was a advanced mathematics student as a very young child. I was in college algebra courses, and, I was a supposedly gifted thinker, and this idea of mathematically perfected economy arose in an economics class that I was forced to take, which was far beneath my usual curricular level, and I was very surprised to find that the textbook had no proofs or theorems whatsoever. It was all hearsay. And when the teacher got to the point of, teaching the definition of inflation and deflation, is when I came up with this idea of mathematically perfected economy, because I basically invalidated his claim that inflation caused and price increases, which I refer to distinctly as price inflation, because they're two different things. And a person who solves problems has to distinguish by their terminology the differences between the things. We don't sloppily persist in a very sloppy behavior of using the word inflation to mean not only different things but inherently conflicting, contradictory things. Well, one can't be true if the other is true. And so, when we evolve above this, and we are all capable of this, people maybe, disinclined to give it the effort that they need to. They'd rather spend their life, on the couch before the television, watching another evening go by than spend that one evening mastering this issue, so that instead of paying for houses for every house they occupy every 20 years, they would spend perhaps $83.33 a month for a brand new $100,000 home with a 100-year lifespan. I mean, the sense of that is ridiculous, that anyone could turn away from this. But with the preconceptions, it's like, they've all been converted to sheep who just say, bah, interest, you have to pay interest. Who would loan us money, But in regard to the military-industrial complex, President Eisenhower warned about that, and of course he came from that field, should have been an expert in it, and certainly should have seen what was manifesting even then. Myself, on the judiciary level, I see all that as a manifestation of, necessary degradation of representation. Because if you allowed the people a vehicle which, even as seemingly difficult as this problem might be, let's just say, in a right world, a young man comes up with this idea that, of mathematically perfected economy, and mathematicians listened. And I mean, I gave speeches early on and impromptu, off the cuff, before 500 professors at the University of Colorado, and without a dissenting opinion, and there were many economists in the room. No one dared challenge me. And so what you have is a matter that, someday another person will figure it out, and it's a matter of injustice. And what we find in all human history is that injustice, especially when it exceeds our ability to tolerate it, always motivates great human change. And we are at that time right now. And so if we can't respond, then we condemn ourselves to yet another era of usury, of artificial indebtedness and terminal failure. So many years will go by with destroyed creditworthiness and all kinds of every imaginable calamity until they give us back a new creditworthiness, decide to start the whole thing over again, so they can multiply artificial indebtedness into another failure. And if you look at history, you suddenly understand, oh, by God, that's the whole pattern that's always been, hasn't it? People say, "Oh no, it never happened under the gold standard." He just lies as the fact that this thing that can only multiply artificial indebtedness is an economy. Baloney. The gold standard has never but coexisted with interest, and the people who end up owning all the gold are the ones who charge all the interest in the end. It makes it impossible to uphold the gold standard. We've never even lived under a true gold standard, and the gold standard has obvious faults. And the gold standard people are the first to stand up against mathematically perfected economy, and they say preposterous things like, this guy's ideas are dangerous. If they take hold, no one is going to have to rent. Well, my God, you ought to stand up and give a standing ovation to that. No one would have to rent. By God, we'd all own our own property that we produce. Well, what in the hell is wrong with that?
That's just crazy talk, Mike. Did you not know that?
Oh yeah, but these are the battles that I have, fought perpetually.
Yeah.
Do some searches for my name with Ron Paul. Go to the Ron Paul forums. There's a preposterous character on there. Such a deceitful, ugly character on there. And I'll give his name in public. It's Republique. And he claims to have he claims to have disproven mathematically perfected economy so many times he's tired of it. You find one of those proofs. You find a legitimate disproof of mathematically perfected economy.
Or in fact, I'll
how
go one better.
preposterous is it?
I'll go one better, Mike. If the guy, if he claims to have a disproof, well, I have an open policy here for guests. If he wants to come on and prove, well, here's his opportunity.
I have the same policy, and that means that for 20 years I've been an outstanding invitation to debate Ron Paul. Same thing goes with anyone and everyone else. Dennis Kucinich, and why is it, Ron? I've had half a dozen of his friends take it to his house, their own written proposition to engage or debate mathematically perfected economy. And the most that he's nothing but evasive about it. And how preposterous is that? Think about this. One guy claims he's disproven mathematically perfected economy. Oh, really? Inflation and deflation, for example. Is it possible there's an alternate solution for inflation and deflation than maintain a circulation which is perpetually equal to the wealth it's intended to represent? The idea that there is an alternate is preposterous, because you can't deviate from it an iota and be adhering to the and fail to adhere to the definition. In other words, you can't have an increase at any moment and you can't have a decrease at any moment.
Well, it's like a tire. If you're inflating a tire with a hole in it, if you keep inflating it, it's going to burst.
Yeah, I don't like to get that generic with my explanations, because
I know.
whole, I don't go there. I'm not trying to embarrass you. You just threw a curve at me. I can't respond to that, because, in other words, if I'm going to ask you what you mean by whole, and so maybe we should go there if you want to. But what I'm saying is really something that's just so fundamentally obvious to anyone with any reasonable mathematics skill, which we all should have. I'm talking second grade math skills. Question is, a thing goes up in proportion to thing 3, or thing 2 goes down in proportion to thing 3. Thing 1 and thing 2 can't happen. Can't go up and down, up in proportion to thing 3, and 2 can't go down in proportion to thing 3. What is the only thing that it can do? It has to be equal. There is no other alternative, you see. And so to even contest this idea is just so preposterous. If we don't know that there's a singular solution to inflation and deflation, there is nothing that we can know by math. It's that fundamental. It's that basic. It's that simple. It's that cut and dry. So for these guys to claim that they've disproven mathematically perfected economy, and typically, I mean, what this idiot Republica, he calls himself, does, he's not disproving mathematically perfected economy at all. He's actually trying to disprove my thesis of inherent failure, and he's done it. It's just a shambles of that too. It's all in his own arrogant little mind, because I leave some things unexplained, which I touched on actually in this explanation, which are bait, so to speak, for anyone to come out of the woodwork and claim to try and at least to justify this bastardization of the truth that we call economy. It's one of the hugest lies in history that this is an economy. And they've come out of the woodwork, and basically the only attempt to disprove this thesis of inherent failure, which is not mathematically perfected economy. It's a proof of a terminal fault that we absolutely have to resolve, or we're going to have the present conditions. I mean, I provide Ronald Reagan 25 years ago with computer models that give this year as the time it's about to go belly up about then. And anyway, these guys, they don't have a disproof. And an example of this, if you go to my earlier website, we're working on a new presence where we're hosting a worldwide mandate, every country in the world, for mathematically perfected economy and absolute consensual representation. But if you go to my former website and you want to see an invalidation of one of these attempts to disprove not mathematically perfected economy, and these guys themselves, they're such poor intellectuals, if you will. They're certainly not disciplinarians of, practitioners of math according to the rules of the game. Anyway, if you wanted to read an article, a typical attempt to disprove just the thesis of inherent failure, there's an article in regard to a person named William B. Ryan. And to give you an idea of some of the history of that, this guy around 1994, 5. In there, out of the blue, emailed me, seeming to give my ideas some weight, inviting me to introduce myself to a so-called social credit forum, Douglas A plus B theorem, so-called. And, he just told me to introduce my idea to go ahead and introduce myself and explain mathematically perfected economy to these people. And I mean, within 15 minutes, I got 20 of the most irrational, irate emails a person would ever receive. And, I began immediately answering politely to the first one and to the second and to the third. And, and I've got 80 more on the heels of that, and next thing you know, 200 emails, and this went on for 2 weeks, and I answered politely every question that was asked in the form of a proof, indisputable answers. And, in the end, I won't tell you what I told these people, but, it was far less polite than take a long walk on a short pier.
All right.
And now, 20 years later almost, there's people in this forum. I mean, I've got people all over the world watching all these developments all the time and reporting back to me. And there's people in that forum who are integrating my ideas as if they were Douglas's original A plus B theorem. And just for the audience's purposes, I'm not an economist. If I am an economist, I'm the only true economist, and anybody else who might fall into this same school of thought. Excuse me. On the other hand, I would rather say that I'm a mathematician, and I'm certainly don't fall in any regular conventional category of an economist. And I'm the guy with the disproof of everything out there. But the so-called economics world is one of the most screwiest things. I mean, most of us in our